Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from anywhere you are watching this live section. So, today I will be teaching the section 2 of our Excel interactive dashboard. So, in this lecture, we will continue from where we stopped at the lesson 1. This time around, we'll be looking at our Excel interactive dashboard, the pivot chart, the pivot graph, and also how to use the conditional formatting in order to make your work more interactive, engaging, and visually appealing. Without wasting much of our time, we have a set of data here. All you need to do is to turn this set of data to a table by pressing Ctrl T. So once you press Ctrl T, this data turns to a table and you will see all this filter funnel, it will appear. So once you have turned this data to a table, the next thing is to add your pivot table. So for those that don't know how to add the pivot table, you simply go to your insert, click on the pivot table, then on the new worksheet, you just click OK. Excel automatically adds another sheet for you, and you can now rename that sheet whatever you want to rename it. So this is where your pivot table analysis will be done. So here, every figure in this particular data set here can be transformed and beautified and use it to make good meaningful meaning in this particular sheet. So all you need to do is to come here and you will see on this your pivot table fields by the right side, you will see all the headings of your raw data set in the first sheet. So all you need to do is to come here and do your analysis on what you want to achieve. In this particular training or in this particular teaching, let's assume that we want to find the sales rep and use it to analyze what they have achieved so far for the year. As you can see, our raw data set has the date, states, sales rep, product, category, quantity, sales amount, and all that and all that. So we want to know this sales rep, what they have achieved so far in the state they have achieved this, and to make it visually appealing so that top management or anyone that finds our results will make meaningful meaning without going through all this voluminous set of raw data. So what you need to do is to go back to that your sheet where you have already created the pivot table. Then in this place, on your right hand side, you drag the sales rep and drop it to the rows. So once you do that, it automatically comes to the rows. Then you drag the sales amount, which is the total amount, you drag it to value. So it appears here, you have your rows and you have your sum of sales amount. So having done this, the next thing is for you to maybe increase this font size if you want. You can highlight, then increase this font size, let me say to 18 or thereabout, depending on the font size you want to make use of. So after you have done this, you already have this table. The next thing is for you to start your analysis. So you can actually beautify this pivot table by clicking on the pivot table. Then you go to your design. On the top here, you see a design tab. You click on the design. Different design comes up. So you can decide to pick any of the category you feel like picking. So anyone you touch among this design actually tells you the figure. So it's color, sorry. So you can actually select the color of your choice. So let me just pick this particular table, this one, or let me just pick anyone for academic and teaching purposes. So the selection depends on your choice. So after I have done the selection, I can now decide to do further analysis. So right now I want to remove this grand total. I don't need this grand total. All I need to do is to touch my pivot table, come to this design, then I will see this different layouts, then I will click on the grand total, then I will now say off for row and column. So once I off it, the grand total automatically leaves the pivot table, leaving me with only the sales reps and each of their values. Then after this, I can now decide to add the conditional formatting to make this my pivot table appealing. So all I need to do is to click on the pivot table, then go to home, then on the conditional formatting I will see different conditional formatting. So all I need to do now is to first of all highlight all these tables. I will highlight them, then go to the conditional formatting on this home. Then I can decide to add data bar. So you click on the data bar, so you select any of the data bar you want to add. So anyone represents a data bar. As you are touching them, you see that the pivot table is changing to different bar. So anyone you add will automatically be added by each side. So I can decide to just pick this blue here. I will add it. So my pivot table now have different bar. So after you have done this, so this conditional formatting helps you see at a glance what these figures are saying using the bar design, so that at a glance you can see the one that is the smallest and the one that is the biggest. Even without looking at the number, you already know that Peter has the smallest bar, which is 233000. So you don't even need to look at the figure for you to know what Peter has. Then you can decide to turn these figures into currency by highlighting all the columns B. Then you go to this particular place and you click on this comma. So it automatically turns and makes your figure looks more like a currency, so that you can actually pronounce them if you choose to do that. So now after we have done this, we now want to add our charts and make this work and beautiful, visually appealing, and make the dashboard interactive. So what we need to do is to touch on the pivot table as usual, then go to the pivot analyzer at the top. Once you click on the pivot analyzer, you will see different pivot charts. So you click on the pivot chart. Once you click on the pivot chart, a lot of charts pops up. So we can decide to use the pie chart. So if you use the pie chart, so you can select any of the pie charts here. So we can decide to choose this one. Then we click OK. After we have clicked OK, the pie chart comes up. You can just decide to drop it here. Then you can decide to beautify it by selecting the color of your choice. So anyone that loves coloring, this is where you showcase your talent. Or you can also decide to come to this fill shape and fill the background of this color to look similar to the pivot table background, just for identification. So you can decide to enlarge it. You can decide to enlarge it. It's based on your choice, and you can also drag it around. So after you have added this chart here, then you see your data is making more sense and it is looking more edifying. So you can now decide to, if you check on this pie chart by the side here, you see all the sales rep listed here. So you can also decide to remove any of the sales rep you don't want to see by clicking on this arrow, drop down arrow, and unchecking it. Let me say you don't want to see Emeka and Aisha, so you uncheck them and you click OK. They automatically leave here and they leave the pivot table. So you can come to this filter and also add them back and click OK, and they automatically comes back. So after you have done this, so if you notice, for any of the color you touch in this pie chart, it shows you what is happening there. So right now, let's now add another visually appealing tool that makes our work more interactive, and that is the slicer. So all you need to do is to touch your pivot table, then come to the right, your pivot table fields. Then let's assume that you want to know the state which these people operated and how they did. All you need to do is to come to the state and right click on the state, click add slicer. So a slicer comes up, so you can actually draw the slicer to this end, and you can also enlarge the slicer if you want. That is your choice. So after you have done this, your slicer is ready to do the work. So once you touch on any of the slicer, let's say Abuja, everything automatically changes. If you touch River State, it automatically changes. If you touch Nasarawa State, it automatically changes. This shows you that your slicer is working interactively with your pivot table which is your raw data set presented in this table. So now let's go back. So you have this and you still want to make this dashboard interactive and more visually appealing. All you need to do next is you can decide to remove the grid lines by going to the view, then you remove the grid lines, so the lines are off. So the next thing you might now want to do is to know the products in which these are happening. You click on the pivot table, you go to the product, you right click, add slicer, then the product comes up. You can resize it and put it behind this particular place just to make your dashboard more clean and more friendly and more appealing to the eyes for those that will watch your work. So as you can see, your work has taken a great shape and you can now come to the home again. If you come to the home, you can even decide to change all these pivot tables color if you insist. You just go to insert, then once go to page layout, then you can use this color and change them to the color of your choice. So any color you feel like, you can actually do those ones here and change the colors of your data set to make it more enriching. So after you have done this, you have successfully created a pie chart that shows the management what is happening at a glance. What is happening in this data, you have already showed them here. That so this data set already shows you that this particular person is making higher. If you don't like this color, remember you can go to the page layout, go to color and change this color to a particular color that represents the color that you love very well. So it's all by your choice. So now as you can see, this particular Aisha here is being represented by blue. So if you watch blue, even without touching it, if you watch here, it is showing you that Aisha made the highest sales. So at a glance, you can be able to tell the management that Aisha and Chinedu, which is this and this color, made the highest sales. And you can decide to know where they made these sales. All you need to do is to come to this particular place. You can actually search them by the different states which they made these sales. And let's assume that you want to know what happened in Abuja and Anambra states at once, or in Abuja and Enugu. All you need to do is to click and hold and then click another one. So these two appear. So what I did is that you have to click left click and hold Abuja, then come again and tap Anambra. So the two appears, leaving you with only what happened in Abuja and Anambra. So these are the ways. So you can actually do it for three. So you can actually hold Abuja, then Anambra, then Enugu. It shows you what happens in the tray. All you need to do is to hold down your left key while you click on all the ones you want to select. So as you can see, this is making your presentation more beautiful rather than coming to this particular data set and explaining this one by one. So you can actually even use this to know the unit price of what happened. All you need to note is to add the slicer and your work is done. Thank you so much. If you have any question, do not hesitate to ask your question. I will see you in our section 3.